Welcome everyone to GenealCymru. My name is Di, and today we're doing our first live stream, and we're going to be talking about what to do when you found a new record set. So to set the scene, you're doing your genealogy research, and something great happens. You stumble on a brand new record set. Now you have the task of learning this new record set and figuring out how it's useful to your research. So I'm going to go through how I approach this because I think it's easy to get to a new record set and then look at it and feel a bit overwhelmed and like you don't know where to start with it. And then you kind of just leave it alone and don't get back to it. So what we're going to talk about today is the example that we're using today is the Cardiganshire Constabulary Register of Criminals. And so this is from the National Library of Wales website, accessible free, and it's from the period 1897 to 1933. So the first thing that you want to do when you get to one of these record sets is look for its format. So here we have a page upside down. We'll skip that one. So you want to look for its format. Is it standardized? So if you go from one page to the next, are things basically in the same places? So we can look at this and we have here a photograph and then a little write-up. This one here says Benjamin Davis, Brewer Street, Aberystwyth, hawker, sentenced several terms of imprisonment for wounding, assaulting police, and drunkenness. So we have another one here, another photograph. This is William Croom, who you'll see at the bottom of the screen throughout this live stream. William Croom from Cardiff, chimney sweep, sentenced to 14 days on the 14th of April, 1897 at Llanelli for larceny. So even from looking at this one page, we kind of get a sense of what the standardized format for this record set is. It's kind of like its internal logic. You have name, you have then the address, the job, and then a description of what their sentence is, and then the reason that they're being sentenced. So if we were to go from one page to the next, hopefully we'd find that this is about the same for each of the records. Immediately we find that it's not always like this. We have here Mice Glass Inn in Dehewyd, which was subject of appeal at Cardiganshire Sessions, appeal dismissed and license refused. A case was stated for the High Court. But still we have a photograph, we have the subject, we then have a place, and then we have a little description of what's going on and why they're included in this record. Here we have another photograph, the names of the people, we get their age, we get where they're from, and we get a little description of what they did. So this is a good place to start because it tells you what kind of information you're going to need beforehand to actually know how to use this record. So if you come to this record and you don't have a collection of names that you're looking for, it's not going to be very useful. You might not have a name and you might have a place name. You might have a farm that your ancestors from. That's going to be useful for looking at this record. You might have a combination of name and job. John Smith, a painter, who might be your ancestor. And so then you're going to be flipping through, looking with this information that you have through this record to see if you can find your ancestor. The other thing that you're going to want to do is think about this record set in terms of what kind of people are going to be showing up in these records. You'll find I've flipped through this record set very briefly before, so this is kind of the first time that I'm looking through it. But a lot of these people that you're going to be seeing in this particular record set are poor. You've got laborers, you've got painters, you've got chimney sweeps. Here we have a woman who doesn't have a job. But you want to think about the kind of people who are going to be appearing in these records. What are they like, and are your ancestors like them? Oh, we have Andrew Martin, a fellow genealogist, in the comments saying, "This is a wonderful record, and I love that those deemed criminal were afforded the luxury of having a photograph taken." Exactly. Because getting photographs this early is really rare unless they're ones that have been passed down in the family. So, for a lot of my ancestors that I've been researching recently, they live in Cardiganshire, but they were mostly landowning farmers. The amount of landowning farmers that you might find in here might be very small. A lot of these people, like I said, are going to be laborers. They're going to be the working poor, because oftentimes it is poverty that causes people to steal things, like a lot of these people are being charged with. Other record sets, you're going to be wanting to think about what religion they were. If you're looking at an Anglican parish record, if your ancestors were nonconformists, then you're probably not going to find them there. If same for burials, you can get burial registers for the nonconformist chapels. If your ancestor was an Anglican, they're probably not going to be buried there. So think about who the people are that are going to show up in these records, and if your people are like them. Another thing that you want to be thinking about in terms of like what information is in the records that you will need to have in the back of your mind as you click through them. You can look for signatures. So things like marriage records, you have the witnesses who sign. Very little information usually you get with who these witnesses actually are. But if your ancestor was literate, and you have a copy of a signature that you know is theirs, you can actually click through the marriage register and look for their specific signature, because signatures don't really change that much across time, I've found. So knowing signatures, knowing farm names, knowing occupations, and by figuring out who shows up in these these documents, you will know whether this is going to be a good fit and a useful register to put your time into while you're doing your genealogy research. So like I said before about my Cardiganshire ancestors, I'm probably not going to put much time into this register of criminals looking for them. I'm going to be looking more in the journals that you can find on the National Library of Wales website, which were often written by people of the same social class as my ancestors, and written by a lot of my ancestors and about them. So it'll give you a good sense of if you want to actually put your time into searching these registers. Because this one, there's no search engine. You can't just type in your ancestor's name and have it take you to the page that they're on. Yeah, this is the kind that you just will be clicking through. Hi, Kathy Childers from Kentucky. Welcome. So what next? The next big question that you want to consider when you're looking at these records is, what were the conditions in which the records were created? That might sound a little bit complicated, but it's kind of the who, what, when, where, why of this particular register. So, starting with who made this? Who made this register? So, who was out there recording criminals in Cardiganshire in the late 1800s, early 1900s? We can actually see that. It was the Chief Constable's office in Aberystwyth. And the reason that it's important to know that is because it can give you a sense of what kind of perspective on your ancestors are you getting when you're looking through this particular document. So, like this register it's not going to give you a sympathetic view of your ancestor. It's really just about saying who they are, basic information, and why they're being sentenced and what they're being sentenced to. Not going to tell you exactly a lot about their life story. You might get hints and sense of that based on what their particular crime was, but it's not going to tell you about who they are as a person. It's not going to tell you their hopes and dreams. It's not going to tell you generally who they're connected to, who their family is. It's going to be the kind of very basic information, which is useful, but also you want to kind of get that full picture of your ancestors' lives. And I've talked about this before on the channel. The way that you do that is by getting lots of different kinds of records from lots of different perspectives and kind of putting them together and figuring out who your ancestor was. The next one after who, when were they made? So if you're looking through this register and you don't have a set of ancestors who were alive between 1897 and 1933, it's not going to be particularly useful to you. So keep in mind that who you're going to be looking for fall between those dates. And the bigger part of the when were they made is kind of like what was going on at the time in Cardiganshire for this record between 1897 and 1933. Like, what was the social context of this particular time? And that gets to the why they were made. Like, were there laws being passed at the time that made it so this particular record had to be created? Thinking about the why were they made, were there laws that regulated them being created? As I said, also, were there like big political debates? Because I haven't looked much into the constabulary register that we're looking at, I don't really know about what kind of political things were going on at the time. But if you think about something like the 1851 religious census, this was a census that was taken in 1851 of all of the different churches and chapels all across England and Wales. And it's because people wanted to know, politicians wanted to know, people interested in politics and the vote and other big questions of the day wanted to know where people were going to church. And the reason that that was important is because we were getting into the time period soon of when people were going to fight the tithes. So if you know about the tithe, everyone in the parish who owned a certain amount of land or met certain requirements had to pay a certain amount of money to the Anglican vicar of the parish. But if people in the parish are mostly not Anglican, people aren't going to be very happy with paying money to support the Anglican Church. And so that became a big like political issue in the later part of the 1800s. And so you needed data to figure out what was going on with that. Another person in the chat, hi, Emily Froner from St. Louis, Missouri. Your father's paternal side was Evans from Cardiff in Wales. My maiden name was Evans. The early family settled in Wisconsin. Very cool. Thank you for sharing. The next question you want to consider with looking at new registers is how were they made? So is this a copy? Or is this the primary document? Like, is this the very first document that was created to record these particular people? Or was the person at the constable's office given a series of papers with different information on these people, and they kind of synthesized and pulled out the most important information and put it in this book? So is it a copy or is it the original? Is it a transcript? Transcripts are great if you don't have an original copy, because people who make transcripts sometimes make mistakes, as do we all. So always look for those original records. Was there an informant there who was giving this information? So again, if we think of the census, who was actually telling the census taker or filling out the form with all of this information about names and ages and occupations? Is it someone who was trustworthy, or was it just someone who happened to be there and the census taker got the best information that they could provide? The other thing when considering these new documents is, what were the cultural beliefs and practices that were happening at the time? So kind of broader cultural historical question to give context to this particular booklet. For me, because I come from an academic background, I like to look for scholarly books written by historians or anthropologists or um, sometimes economists. Uh, for this particular register, the criminal register, there's a book called Land of White Gloves, A History of Crime and Punishment in Wales. And that's the kind of book that I would want to read if I wanted to know more about this particular register, because it's telling me about like all of the things that are going on in the world at the time that led to this particular register being created. How did, thinking back to the who made this register, how did police at the time think about the people that they're recording in these registers? Did they think they were morally bad and that's why they committed crimes? Did they take sympathy on them, knowing that many of these people were living in poverty and that's why they were stealing? What are the cultural beliefs about the people who are in these registers? Another thing that you want to check out is old newspapers. The National Library of Wales, which is my favorite website and favorite archive. They have a lot of old newspapers that you can look through. And so there might have been a political row around the creation of this constabulary register. There certainly was around the religious census of 1851. That was a big deal, and you'll find newspaper articles that can kind of flesh out for you what was going on at the time. So definitely look at these newspapers. And one of the things that is going to happen in a future video, not alive, is this guy here, William Croom. Because I'm using his picture in the title, the thumbnail, and at the bottom of your screen at the moment, I wanted to look into who he was as a person, what was his life story. The newspapers are really good at that. And when it comes to things like crime, those things show up, stories about crime show up a lot in the newspapers. because a lot of times they make really great, scandalous, eye-catching stories. William Croom's life is no different. He shows up a lot in the newspapers, and I'm gonna talk about him in a future video. Welcome, Catherine Sommer from Switzerland. Your father's parents were named Williams and Probert, both descended from the families of Offasdyke near Oswestry. Very cool. Welcome. I was going to look at a couple other record sets, but I think this is good. These are kind of the things that I wanted to highlight. Uh, Remember, look for a standardized format. Think about what you need to know for these records to be useful to you. So what are the pieces of information that you need to keep in the back of your mind as you look through them? And what were the conditions in which the records were created? Who made them? When were they made? Where were they made? Why were they made? How were they made? And what was the larger cultural and historical context of them being made? Were they being made because of political issues? Were they being made to create data around a crisis in society? Things like that. And if anyone is in the chat and has any questions or anything, we can end on that. Andrew Martin says, I wonder if there are many people in these records who were deemed criminal simply for being drunk and nothing else, a reflection on social attitudes or religious beliefs in local area at the time. Yeah. Just a quick taste of William Croom's life. He was an alcoholic. His parents were both alcoholics. He grew up homeless. He continued into his later life homeless, and he asked the courts for help over and over and over in the newspaper records that I found about him. He was asking for help directly to the courts, saying, please put me in a an addict center. Please put me in an addict center. I'm an alcoholic. I need help with drinking, he said. Don't take that one out of context. He was asking for help, and they were saying, well, the best we can do is put you in prison. And so he told them, well, if that's the best you can do, as soon as I get out, I'm going to commit more crimes so that you'll put me back in. And so there's big questions there about like social welfare of the time that you would want to look into to get more context about that story. Yeah, like build out our ancestors as much as possible. Figure them out as like real people, not just like names and dates. Welcome. Oh, Emily, you've been here. You found it difficult to search the Evanses primarily because your dad's ancestors reused the names William, John, and David. I know the family cemetery in Dalton, Wisconsin, formerly a Welsh chapel, where many of your ancestors were buried. The thing that I would suggest there is if you find any of those particular ancestors with names that weren't common, so if you've got lots of William, John, and David, and all of a sudden there's a Richard Evans or maybe a Llewellyn Evans, focus in on them because they will give you the answers that you're looking for. There's a presentation coming on that eventually that I'm working on. Your son is planning a trip with you soon. That's really cool. And yeah, Andrew, very I don't know if forward thinking, it felt like desperation on his part. It was very sad reading through William Croom's newspaper articles. But yeah, that's all, I guess, for now. Thanks for everyone for watching, and take care and have a lovely day.